Why do I do it? Is because I believe in myself. I believe in the and I believe in the future of California. I think that we need to have more diversity. I think we need to have more conversations about equity, what that looks like in the distribution of tax dollars, the distribution of, I don't want to see money going into places that we're not getting our biggest bang for our buck. I don't want to see strong programs, childcare programs, educational programs, after-school programs, you know, food programs not get funded because they don't have a lobbyist. They don't have an advocate.
All right, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We have some questions, and so Samia, you want to kick us off here?
Sure. So just to start, kind of a broad question. What do you think the rest of the country doesn't understand or gets wrong about California?
First of all, my name is Malia Cohen. I'm really happy to be here. I've been excited and looking forward to this interview, so thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my vision with you. I'm very grateful. I do follow your publication. What does the rest of the world get wrong about California?
The rest of the country.
The rest of the country? I believe that they think, I think they get it wrong that we are just a wallet. When I think about politicals that come to the state of California to come and just to fundraise, they kind of just take our resources and then they will shun some of our way of thinking or some of our policy initiatives or some of our progressive things that we think about. And I think that that is a little bit of a misgiving. I think that the state of California prospers because we kind of have, what we do well is we have a broad tent and we are more welcoming. It's not to say that we're perfect, but I think that the other parts of the country, particularly the South, the Southeast, could let more women in and be less afraid of women, of people of color, and embrace and do a better job supporting and building infrastructure and support around the immigrant community. So I think that the state of California prospers because of our forethought, our innovative thinking, and the rest of the country could take a lesson from us and not be afraid of what they don't know or what they don't understand, but rather embrace it.
Another kind of personal question so folks can get to know you. What's a political issue you've changed your mind about?
A political issue that I've changed my mind about, well, the first thing that comes to mind is there was one particular vote that was in the city and county of San Francisco. I don't remember exactly the year, but as you know, I spent 8 years on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and there were a lot of land use fights. And I think one vote that I would have, I voted to support a project on the Embarcadero part of San Francisco was a development. And that is one vote that I would have changed. I would have not supported the additional building of luxury housing. I would have fought more. I would have fought more for including more affordable housing units in the development on site on the property. As a result of that vote, I tried to constantly atone for that vote. So when I looked at projects, I was more informed. I just became a better supervisor after taking one vote that I regret. Another example, if you don't mind, has to do with shootings. I know Sacramento was just reeling with the shootings on Sunday. There were several shootings in the part of San Francisco that I represented, the southeastern part of the neighborhood. And I got tired of law enforcement saying it was the victim's fault. They pulled out a knife, they pulled out a gun. Things that were, here's one that blew my mind. The victim, the assailant was running away but shooting backwards and shot himself. Turns out through an autopsy, law enforcement shot him. Long story short is that it moved me to make policy that has had sweeping changes in the city and county of San Francisco that I think the entire state, let alone the country, could benefit from, and that is independent investigations whenever there's a officer-involved shooting, that there needs to be an autonomous body that is also auditing law enforcement. So those are two examples of things that where I didn't change and I didn't spur into action and then where I immediately spurred into action. And that was quite honestly a difference of 3 years of experience and just a little bit more wisdom in serving.
So how would you explain to the average voter what the controller does?
I got this down. I have visuals. Okay. When we're talking about accounting, you have two sides of the house. You have accounts receivable and you have accounts payable. I talk about the accounts receivable is the treasurer's job, Fiona Ma, our elected treasurer. Money comes into the state of California. She's got deep relationships. The state of California has relationships with banking institutions. She's responsible for investing a portion of that money. She's responsible for ensuring our bond rating is high. The bond rating is important to us because it allows us to raise money and develop, have money to go build infrastructure projects. So that is one side, accounts receivable, money is coming in. Then there's the other part that I'm interested in, accounts payable, money leaving the accounts. So Betty Yee, who is our state controller, her responsibility is to make sure that there's money in the accounts, to make sure that state employees get paid, to make sure those that are doing contracting and business with the state of California, that their monies are also paid. So it's easy to understand when you make it and break it down into those terms.
What is the single most important thing that you could do if elected controller?
Those are everyday functions, right? You're sitting on 78 different boards and commissions. You're sitting on CalPERS and CalSTRS. You sit on CIDLAC and TCAC, so you have policy responsibilities and you're a vote. You're actively engaging. Now, there's a softer side of leadership. Being able to stand on a platform, to have a social media platform and following, and to be able to opine on opinions, to give critical analysis and thought, to be able to say, I support Roe v. Wade, I support a woman's right to choose. So that would be writing an op-ed piece. Speaking to organizations when we're talking about affordable housing. There's an intersection between affordable housing and the controller's office, but there's a realness to it. Sometimes it gets lost when we're talking about policy, when we're talking about economics, or if we're talking about investment strategy as it relates to CalPERS and CalSTRS. Not losing that human connection and remembering every day who we're serving and why we are serving them. The great state of California serving taxpayers. So saying, I am your advocate, I'm going to cut out waste, but what does that mean on an everyday person's life? I explain it like, well, I make sure that big corporations like Amazon don't snake through loopholes and that they're paying their fair share when it comes to property taxes. I say, making sure that companies like corporations like PG&E, they own lots of land, but we want to make sure that they're not, that they're paying their fair share in taxes. Small taxpayers, people who own their homes, they're paying their taxes, and we want to be very fair and very consistent and also transparent.
Yeah, I do have a follow-up
Sure.
question. So do you see the controller's office as a policy shaping role?
I do. I see the policy, and I think that's what makes me one of the best candidate because of having experience in shaping and analyzing and writing policy, drafting with them, working with the Board of Equalization and still creating policy, partnering with members of the legislature to make that policy change a reality. And then also, as the controller, you have more of an impact on tax policy. You have an opportunity to talk to the governor, to the director of finance, as well as the different Senate and Assembly committees as well. So you do have a policy-making body. And then I also feel a responsibility to uplift and inspire other women that want to run for office, other members, particularly that are from communities of color that also want to run for office, and really demystifying that process. So it's a really unique position, and I believe, going back to my point about leadership, is that any station, wherever we are in life, it's what you make it. I could be lazy, I could just sit back and do just the bare minimum of the requirements, and quite honestly, as I've been talking about this race and my vision for the controller seat, a lot of people have not been receptive of a big picture of what a controller's office could actually be. And I've been told that I'm running for the wrong position. And I vehemently disagree. I think that we do need to elect strong people with strong values that are not afraid to stand up and are not afraid to speak out, whether it's in their tiny little box or not a tiny little box. And so the Controller's Office, or whether it's the Board of Equalization, or whether it's dog catcher, I think that we still need to have strong, thoughtful people that are able to read, write, and think, and then articulate and connect with people about that vision, about the policy decisions, about why they're taking the position that they're taking.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to have a pulpit to speak from, though.
Exactly.
You could be in the legislature, you could run for all different kinds of offices. So why in particular the Controller's office versus any of those others?
The Controller's Office is important because it's the chief fiscal officer for the entire state of California, and money matters. And I particularly am paying careful attention to equity. I want to make sure that when we are conducting these audits, or when we are talking about our budgets, that we are equitably distributing the resources. I believe that coming out of the pandemic showed us a lot of areas where our gaps were. There are areas that state government has failed Californians, and I think that I do have a unique skill set that would be able to come in and have a conversation and begin to make changes. The EDD, the Employment Development Department, really imploded during the pandemic. Prior to the implosion and prior to the pandemic, you might remember DMV also imploded. And so I'd be interested to see if there are some strategic themes. Now, I'm not elected to this position, so I don't have the authority to come in and start asking a lot of questions and really get under the hood. But I have had some informational interviews with people that are in key positions that have helped answer some of my questions. One of the things that I have noticed is that technology, that although we live in the state of California, has truly failed us. And we are not utilizing it in the best way possible. You have widely reported on Fiscal. That I believe a strike team needs to be made up and to begin to drill down to understand exactly where, why, and how there is a disconnect and on the deliverables. There is, as you know, there was recently a hearing in the Senate about Fiscal. I don't want to go too far down that line, but we're starting to put some political energy into paying attention to why things are not working. The Employee Development Department, I think, needs an audit. I'd like to know exactly what happened. There was a lot of fraud. There were people who were in need that were kicked off the rolls. On the Board of Equalization, I've been in the process of modernizing our business practices. And quite honestly, the pandemic was a blessing. It allowed us to, I've been making the argument that we could do more things online, and it has fallen flat because people tell me all the time, no, we need a wet signature versus an a third-party signature. And I said, why? We buy and sell property all the time through DocuSign. Why can't we begin to implement some of that policy, technology? Really comes down to cost. And I believe that the Controller's Office is in a unique position to clear some of the noise, to give an independent set of eyes on, from a financial analytical perspective, on where the issues are. Homelessness, lots of money is being spent towards homelessness. I don't know if we are using, this is not a value statement, this is an honest statement. I don't know if we are meeting our mark. We still have homelessness. Are the programs working? I don't know, but I do know that a performance audit would begin to tell us exactly where we are meeting our mark. Supporting some of the rural parts of the state of California. I represent 23 counties, 10 million people. I'm very closely in touch with the rural parts of the state. And they have challenges too. They have, people are retiring, people are not coming into state employment at the same rate. Budgets are always tight and constrained, particularly on a county level. So there is a loss of talent, but being able to, the Controller's Office has a little over 3,000 employees to be able to provide support for smaller counties. In particular, I'm thinking about Humboldt County. I've been in touch with the auditor in that county that would like a little bit more support. So Again, I think that's where leadership matters, being able to take an account into where the state's weaknesses are and be able to bolster them so that we are able to deliver a stronger product, stronger advice, help to those that need help. And ultimately serving on the county level, we are connecting with Californians that need some help.
I mean, at the same time, you know, to this notion of serving as a check on the government, I mean, the people you'd be auditing, the departments you'd be auditing, I mean, these are all under the administration of allies of yours. You know, Gavin Newsom, Eleni Kounalakis,
Yep.
Fiona Ma, and you would be having to hold them accountable, potentially embarrassing results.
No, let me.
So-
I disagree. I think it is about how you present the information. It doesn't have to be embarrassing. My style is not I got you, aha. I'm not trying to catch you in the hot seat. I'm not trying to catch you in a lie, or even embarrass you. That has never been my leadership style. It is definitely more collaborative, and I do have deep relationships with the folks that you mentioned that go back decades, quite honestly, in service back in San Francisco, to service on the Board of Equalization and on the statewide level, working with new members, particularly of the Legislative Women's Caucus. And so my style really is if I find an audit and I find something that is glaring or could potentially be embarrassing, talking to the person, just having an honest conversation and saying, this is what I found, what can we do about this, just working a little bit more collaboratively in the approach of it.
But I guess, sorry, just to piggyback off that a little bit, I mean, so for voters who are looking for a truly independent controller, you know, who can serve that role in government, I guess, how do you see your approach fitting with that if it is a more collaborative one?
I see. So collaborative is not is not indicative of you are my friend, therefore you get a pass. That is not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have a friendly professional relationship, and in all relationships, you agree to disagree. And I've been in positions where I've already disagreed. I disagree with Betty's dual endorsement. But yet still being able to continue to work with her and get information, and she answers my questions. Working in the past, I point to the past about past examples of where I have admitted when I was wrong or where I've made a mistake, admitted where I needed more information, and also been able to withstand the pressure of not being able to deliver on something that someone has asked me to do. People ask for a vote, I'm not able to deliver, and because it's not in the best interest of my constituencies. So basically what I'm saying is that being able to have the fortitude to stand up and to say, this is not in the best interest of California. And so how do I demonstrate that? By when the flavored tobacco community, it's a mean, vicious online trolling community, just withstanding a lot of their pressure and tactics, their hate calls, their tweets, their harassment. When it comes to taking difficult votes, people protesting. I haven't had the experience that they've protested my house, but they have protested in front of the office, in front of City Hall, and being able to withstand that vote, but also standing firm and articulating, this is my position. Here are the dates. Here are the figures, here are the facts, this is why I stand on that. And I think that is what most Californians are interested in. To have a fighter that is tested and that can stand in their resolve and not buckle under that pressure. And that most certainly includes giving bad news to friends.
Would it be better if this office were a nonpartisan office, do you think?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know if it would be better or worse, but I do believe it would still continue to function.
And can you talk about why you are a Democrat?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe I'm a Democrat because I certainly believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe that in diversity and inclusiveness. I believe in that we have a role in helping other people that need help. in terms of redistributing resources available for this for tax dollars. I mean, those are pretty much my core values. I don't know if this is a democratic principle, but I certainly believe in transparency.
So I was going to ask, are there elements of being a Democrat that would affect the way you do your job if you're elected controller? How would being a Democrat matter or not matter?
I don't see it as, I don't see the two being joined. I don't see that, I think that one could be independent.
Well, more, I think maybe we mean like, not ideologically, but philosophically, some of these principles that you sort of refer to as democratic principles, you know, whether it be abortion access or dealing with inequality or whatever it is, are there ways that you might approach your role as controller to tackle those issues, for example, or anything like that? Is there a way you would imagine you'd be a particular type of controller because you are a Democrat, for example?
No, I can't imagine. I can't imagine that at all. No, I think that it's like saying, because you're a black woman, will you attack being a controller in a different way? No, I don't see it. Perhaps once I win and I come back, I can have more stories to share with you, and I can say actually with tangible examples. But I cannot think of anything that would. Yeah, I'm thinking about tax policy, right? I'm thinking about, you know, the controller sits on State Lands Commission, and she sits on the Coastal Commission. So, you know, I don't know if it's a Democrat perspective to be leery of onshore, offshore drilling, as an example. So would that color my lens? I guess I would say quite possibly yes, but I'm not able to really discern what's the Democratic side of me, what's the being a mother and bringing life into the world side of me. You know, I don't know. I can't segment it up that way, because honestly, I do think I'm probably the sum total of my life experiences. And, you know, and I think that being the sum total of a different set of life experiences does make me unique. Does make me a unique candidate in this race. Few women have been in this position. Few mothers have been in this position. No African American has served in this capacity. You know, so it's, you know, I think Betty and John Chung have really done a good job in breaking us away from the kind of the straight white male model. But I don't, you know, that's a very thoughtful question. You must have thought long and hard on that one.
So can you talk a little bit more about how you would reconcile this collaborative approach that you talked about with public transparency to the taxpayers and to the citizens of
What do you mean?
California?
I don't
So
think I understand.
You said that if you had some findings that might be somewhat negative, you might go to the governor or go to the
I would go to the stakeholder first.
And talk about it, right?
Right.
And so does that mean that you would talk to them first before you would issue a report to the public, or how would that work?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how I would quite approach that. I would probably go to the stakeholder, to the partner, to find out, did I miss something? Am I interpreting something wrong? Are my set of assumptions, you know, when you have an audit, there's some assumptions that you're putting together. Maybe the auditors or the accountants might have missed something. So I would say, do you agree upon, you know, this information? And so that would be, I would use judgment, and it wouldn't be just one-on-one. I probably would have a team of folks to balance out the perspective. So when pushback came, there'd be a counterbalance. So I would maybe if there are previous audits or previous reports, review them to see if there were some consistent themes here, or areas of concern, or oftentimes audits, most times audits have findings. Have the findings been implemented? Were they implemented accurately? So it's very just hard for me to say exactly.
But you're not talking about a situation where if someone disagrees with your findings that you would never see the light of day.
No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm comfortable with being with you in disagreement with the findings. I think people rely on these audits, businesses. Businesses on these reports that are produced. I mean, businesses rely on them for their business. So the information that I'm signing my name to would be true, as far as I can see. So.
To jump to one of the policy questions, what specific strategies would you use to prevent waste and fraud?
What specific strategies to prevent waste and fraud? Well, there are survey assessments that can be conducted internally, depending on the scope and what we are trying to assess. We've talked a lot about audits, but an audit is a wide, universal tool. Sometimes audits are not able to be strategic and able to, to drill down to a specific policy issue. What was the second portion of your question?
What strategies you would use to prevent waste and fraud?
Strategies. Hearings, partnering with members of the legislature to call for a hearing, to have all the stakeholders or all the parties involved, and we would have an opportunity. It would be transparent. It would be certainly a record of it in public, and I think it would be a good baseline to start from. Then I would have, again, some kind of a survey tool or conduct an audit, and work with the Director of Finance, particularly, to see if they have any numbers or anything that they could contribute to whatever we're trying to drill down or to better understand. And then I would come back and make public my findings, and if there are recommendations, make the recommendations.
I've got some specific questions on policy issues that have come up recently. So your office would be sending out checks.
Yeah.
One issue that's come up recently is the question of either another broad round of stimulus or some sort of payment for gas price relief. Do you support either of those two policy options?
I don't have a position on either one of the policy options. I think that the Comptroller's office, particularly when it comes to that, is to just find a way to streamline the Golden State stimulus checks, find a way to partner and to get those checks to Californians as quickly and as efficiently as possible, ensuring that there isn't any fraud, any loss, or anyone receiving money when they don't qualify. So I believe that that's already a system that is quite established. And the second question was?
I was asking about potential forthcoming rounds of stimulus.
Oh yeah, I don't have I have no position on the stimulus checks.
Okay.
Or gas. You said something about the gas.
Yeah. There's
retail.
a potential, checks for gas price relief. Another question I was going to ask about that, and maybe you don't have a position on this either, but there are, it's a possibility that it will go out to everyone under a certain income. There's also the possibility it would go out to, car owners. Do you have thoughts about how relief payments should be targeted?
No, not in terms of the Comptroller. I think that's more of definitely, I think, to your point about being a little bit more independent and just a function, administrative function, and executing it.
And then I also wanted to ask about pensions, since that's part of this job. How would you propose to reduce the unfunded debt of the pension and benefits funds for teachers and public employees?
Well, I don't necessarily. You're talking about the unfunded liability?
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to answer for you because state employees that have worked really hard, teachers that have worked really hard, I do believe that they should be able to retire and to count on their check, to count on their retirement. But I don't think we can naively continue being blind and relying on the robust state government or the robust budget and the governor to continue to pay the unfunded liability. I do think that there should be some augmentation to the policy strategy. Quite honestly, I think we have to figure out a way to widen the base, and I'm not quite sure how to go about widening the base, but I don't think that it is a stable model that is going to be sustainable.
When you say widening the base, do you mean widening the tax base, like having more people pay taxes that would go to fund the pension funds?
No, I wouldn't go so far and say that there should be more taxes, but maybe paying attention about how businesses are assessed, yeah, I would just say we need to widen it. I don't want to say specifically who we should target. I don't have enough information to give you that detail. But I am concerned about the unfunded liability. I'm concerned about the fiscal health for the state of California, just the economic direction that we're going to be going in. I don't see it as a sustainable long-term strategy.
Just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, when you're talking about widening the base, you're talking about widening the tax base, right?
We are talking about the wire tax base, yes, more people paying in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should there be changes now to current employees and people that are hired? Should they be promised less in terms of pensions to head off future problems from overextension? At a second tier, in other words?
Should they be promised less?
In other words, less generous pensions.
Yeah, I understand. I think that's a difficult question also. I can't make a sweeping statement because there's just different classifications. There's different levels of investment that people put into the system. So I don't have an answer for you. I don't have one for you right now, yeah. Can I come back?
Sure. Another kind of question surrounding pension funds. Would you support divesting entirely from Russian companies or funds because of the war in Ukraine?
In my background, I served 7 years on the pension fund in the city and county of San Francisco. At the time, it was about a $25 billion fund, and it's since grown since I've been off of it. And divestment is always a hot issue. And it's an issue that I think that we have to be thoughtful and judicious about. In the 80s, it was divesting from Darfur. In the 80s, it was divesting from apartheid South Africa. And here we are on this side of history. It's proven to be correct, but it was not a first result. It was not the first strategy that was employed. We've heard requests to divest from Ireland also. Recently, gun manufacturers. I remember Senator Scott Wiener was calling for divestment from countries that were homophobic. So I'm cautious about the call for divestment on topics of the day. There are many ways to begin to register your protest before a full divestment. I would also say I don't know exactly where our investments are. I don't know how much money is invested from Russia. Do you know that number?
Not off the top of my head.
No.
I think it's been reported by Reuters, though.
Okay.
Like $1 billion.
A significant amount. A significant amount.
But very small in proportion to the total of the pension
Right.
fund, like around 1%, I think.
So, because I don't know that information, but that would be the first place I would start. Well, how much money are we talking about? What is our divestment strategy? Have we done anything? Have we done any escalation? Have we done any proxy votes? Have we written to other stakeholders? Like I would engage in an escalation before we get to that point. And I think that that's a prudent way to continue the conversation, and also it educates people. And I'm speaking a little bit from a place of experience. I led the effort to divest about $100 million from fossil fuels, from our fossil fuels in San Francisco, and it took 3 years to get done. And it was a 3-year education process for not only our members, but also staff and our financial advisors and partner, everything. It just took a little bit of time to get there. And hindsight now, it's proven to be lucrative. And granted, like you said $1 billion in Russian dollars, 100 million is not a lot of money, but we were able to make that divestment. And we put 100 million into a fossil fuel-free index. And so the asset is continuing to grow. So I use it as just an example of a strategy, an approach that I think was a prudent way. People certainly said, it's too slow, we want divestment from fossil fuels immediately, and we want it now. And I think that that's a political issue that really needs a gradual build up to.
So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you don't have a position on whether or not right now the pension funds should be trying to divest, or whether or not you support immediate divestment.
Right. I mean, right now I'm not on the body, so this is just a matter of opinion, and I don't have all of the information that the members of CalPERS and CalSTRS have before them. I don't have any of the actuarial reports. I don't know anything, so that's why I would be cautious. I'm cautiously saying I can't say I'm for it or against it, but I can say I definitely feel the power. I do know the power of the dollar, and I do know what a divestment would mean systematically, globally. You've got the UN weighing in, you've got the President of the United States weighing in, you've got seizing assets from oligarchs. I mean, like there is a strategy that it certainly is afoot and moving forward, but I don't really know again where the holdings are. So.
One more question on pensions. Are there any other specific investment policies of those two huge pensions that you believe should be changed?
Should be changed? I don't have a deep understanding of exactly their pension strategy. I haven't met with anyone, so I don't have anything to offer in terms of change today.
Shifting to taxes, are there any changes that you would support in the state's tax structure? Taking into consideration the shift from goods to a more service-based economy.
You're talking a little bit about the future of work and the future of California and what that would look like. I do believe that we are moving towards a gig economy. I do think that there does need to be some sort of a restructuring of economic power and empowerment. Otherwise, I think that we will continue to see wage gaps growing. We will see a growing poorer class. I think that will also exacerbate the homeless crisis. I think that will also exacerbate people wanting to purchase a home. So I can see it. I see the decisions that people are talking about shouldn't be siloed. That there really needs to be more of a broader approach. I think the Future of Work Commission did a really good job, and they've produced some pretty stellar recommendations. Some on economic policy, some on the finance policy, on tax policy. I haven't seen anything explicit, other than I cannot recall the specific recommendation, the policy recommendation that they spelled out in the findings, but the reasoning was sound.
Could you explain what
the reasoning was? The reasoning, I mean, the companies are leaving the state of California. The tax burden is very high for businesses. We have inflation that we're now dealing with, so that's the feds are increasing rates there to try to stave off the highest inflation that we've ever had in the last, 50 years. And that I haven't seen the legislature take action, so I don't see the controllers necessarily in a position to guide the conversation on tax policy. I see her more as a thought leader, being at the table and being a part of the conversation.
On a similar thread, do you support a wealth tax, increasing taxes for higher income Californians?
I have supported a wealth tax in the past, particularly coming out of San Francisco, and that wealth tax was more geared and centered around property. Property over, I think it was maybe $4 million in value. Vacant property also was also voters passed an initiative that I was supportive of. Yeah.
We've talked a little about, auditing and auditing one of the tools of this job. If you were elected into this role, what would be the first program that you would audit?
The first
highest
program?
priority?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I would be really interested in looking at not a program specifically, but a department. The employee development, EDD, the employee development department was something that I'm interested in. Another area that I'm curious about is where there aren't a lot of dealing with corrections, how our tax dollars are being spent when it comes to the corrections agencies.
Are you concerned that?
No concerns, just curious.
Oh, okay.
No concerns, just curious. Like I said, I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm eager to get under the hood and just to see what's there, to see what an audit would tell me. Where are monies being spent? Are these programs working? Another program that is interesting that I'm attracted to is several of the homeless initiatives. I'd like to know if we're spending good money, or are we throwing good money after bad? That's a relatively newer spending program that I just would like to know a little bit more about.
I know you mentioned in the past in your role on the Board of Equalization that you've cut wasteful spending, and could you talk a little bit more about sort of what specifically
what that would look like? Yeah.
that involved?
Yeah. One thing I started talking about it when you were asking a question. I don't think I really finished my thought. We're talking about utilizing technology as a platform, cutting waste. Lots of money was saved when we were shut down and we were working from home. And I know even in my own office in San Francisco on the Board of Equalization, we saved a lot of money. There was no cable bill, there was no internet bill, and so what we did was we dispersed resources into people's homes and we set people up. I also remember when I came to Sacramento how inflexible state government was. I was looking at co-working spots. I don't come to Sacramento that often, several times a month to either have meetings or hearings with the members of the legislature, or Board of Equalization meetings and prep meetings with the agency staff. But spending rent for Class A property, Class A office space. I was at 1201 K Street, huge office suite, and it just didn't feel right that it was a good allocation of resources. But to state government's credit, all these reasons on why they were inflexible, why we couldn't be in a co-working space, why we couldn't rent a space when we were in town. I thought that was just inflexible and a waste. And so I would like to see us being able to scale back. We don't think we need a large footprint in the same way that we needed before. And I'm not talking about compensating security. Looking at electronic wallets as another example to do commerce and business within the state of California with Californians as we are transferring money to different accounts, protecting their identity is important. Cutting waste. Where else have we cut waste? The assessment appeals boards. Part of the role and function of the Board of Equalization is we set the rules that assessors use to assess property. Every taxpayer has the constitutional right to appeal that assessment, and that appeal process happens at the Assessment Appeals Board, right? And that board is then you have some people are appointed, some people apply for the position. There is no systematic way on how different counties have an assessment appeals board. An idea that we had talked about was having a panel of experts start to go into different counties and start to hear hearings. It would cut down on some of the, this is an idea. This has not been executed on, but has been vetted. to cut down on counties' need to rent space, have audiovisual. Sometimes they need to have renew license, technology licenses. If we had just a panel and we had one general body that would travel into various parts of the county of the state of California to hear these hearings, they would have a body of expertise as well as continuity in their level of understanding. I think that would be a more efficient way to have hearings. I think that we should be able to do it online so that taxpayers wouldn't have to spend the time coming into town, paying the gas, paying for parking, paying if they get a ticket. Like if they came to San Francisco, you would probably get a ticket. And just dealing with that hassle, but being able to get online, having confidence to know that your tax information is maintained, your lawyer is present, it's a legal proceeding. So that is something that I have been continuously pushing for, that I think that it would cut out waste in our tax dollars.
With the savings that you have been able to, I guess, realize through some of these ways of reimagining government, what did you do?
What do we do? Nothing.
Send it back to the state?
We haven't done anything with it. As you know, if you don't use it, you lose it, but we have not done anything. Which brings me back to fiscal. And the reason why we don't use it is because it's hard to get financial reports to the Board of Equalization. I mean, it's crazy how much state government is run without a working centralized accounting system to tell me on a quarterly basis where my money is, where my expenditures are. Everything is extremely high level, and it doesn't provide me the detail that I need in order to run District 2.
I was hoping you could clarify something for us. So you talked earlier about this broader vision for this job, but then you also told us that you don't see the controller having a direct role in tax policy.
No.
And not having like a recommendation on how a gas tax relief plan would work. So what specifically are you talking about in this broader role?
Okay, so what I said was, or at least what I was trying to convey is that the conversation about tax policy doesn't just come from the controller's office. I think she's got one vantage point and one unique lens that it would be an error to just take her policy recommendation without factoring all of the other information from the other stakeholders across the entire state. That includes the auditor, that includes on a county level, that includes, I would say, the finance and taxes, finances, and fee agencies. The treasurers as well has a compelling conversation, part of the conversation. So just to clarify that. When I talk about being broader and talking a little bit about what the controller's office could be, I mean, being more than just a bean counter. Being very thoughtful about the position that you have. Being a thought leader, being able to shape more policies. From what I understand, from what I gather, it's I don't know the full breadth, and I don't know exactly where Controller Yee spends all of her time and her energy, but there are 78 different boards and commissions, and oftentimes deputies are sent to these boards and commissions. I would take a broader interest in attending CIDLAC and TCAC, for example, and not sending just a deputy there. I'm interested in the health finance districts. The Victims Compensation Fund is also, something that I'm interested in. Crime is an issue where people are talking about. Well, let's figure out whether that intersection of crime and where crime and finance intersect, and they actually intersect in the Victims Compensation Fund. So just being a little bit more present in a broader sense. There are bond oversight committees that I'd like to have a little bit more of a hands-on approach to. So that is what I mean when I talk about the active role.
So what other critiques do you have of...
No, you're putting words in my mouth. I am not offering a critique. I'm sharing with you an expanded vision that I have for myself as the state controller.
Good political.
Oh my God! How dare you? What's your name? I gotta watch you. Tricky. Wow. No more questions from you, okay?
You know, one thing that's come up a lot in the conversations we had so far is bipartisanship, because a lot of the people that we have been talking to are Republicans running in a largely Democratic state. But I'm curious if for you, as a Democrat who has been in office in San Francisco, which is maybe the most Democratic part of the state, and now obviously being a statewide official in a very Democratic state, are there any sort of significant experiences that you had working with Republican colleagues that really stand out to you as, I don't know, just that you got something out of that sort of changed your perspective?
Well, I wouldn't say that it changed my perspective, but I found an ally where I didn't know if I would have an ally. And so you know very well that the Board of Equalization went through sweeping changes in 2017 before I got on the board. And there are always questions about the need or the existence of the Board of Equalization. And so when I was elected in 2018, in 2019, I started just talking to every member of the legislature about the role and the function and the duties of the Board of Equalization. And, you know, and the Board of Equalization, similar to the duties of the Controller's Office, we still are taxpayer watchdogs, right? Making sure that the rules that affect around property taxes are fair. And so that means that the property that is the formula that we are used to assess property in Colusa County or Alpine County, a lot of these more rural areas, are consistent with what's happening in West Sacramento County or in Sacramento County or in San Francisco and LA, and the bigger ones, in the bigger counties. So just communicating that with people, understanding that how the impact of the Williamson Act what that has done to agriculture and the ag community and property taxes, and how that has had an impact on the county level on their revenue stream. So being able to talk to people in that on that level of commonality, yes, there was a lot of common ground. And I did find allyship in educating people about the Board of Equalization, our duties, and then also securing the future of the Board of Equalization, being able to restore the HR delegation, being able to maintain and grow a little bit the BOE budget, being able to continue to hire our vacancies. So that required me to go out and talk to people. So I don't think I changed hearts and minds across the aisle, but you know, I did develop relationships, and so I mean, I guess I'll rest there.
One question I have, you know, the cost of building anything in California can be a major barrier to achieving public policy goals. Thinking about the cost of affordable housing, the cost of, but also infrastructure projects, transit projects. Why do you think it's so expensive to build here, and is there anything the Controller can do about it?
That's a really good question, and it's a yes or no question. And I hate to dance around. Don't take it personally, but your questions are complicated. And the answers are nuanced because they're complicated. There's a strong relationship between the Controller's role and the Treasurer's role when it comes to bond financing, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to just development, in particular affordable housing. Bonds are really important to the affordable housing developers. They need those tax dollars or they need the bonds in order to get these properties built. So on one hand, the state of California's bond rating is important. So we need to be successful in maintaining that. So that's the Treasurer's responsibility. I think that the Controller and the Treasurer do need to remain on the same page when it comes to streamlining projects, eliminating the red tape for financing for affordable housing so that we are getting more affordable housing. Affordable housing is expensive, particularly when you factor in labor and labor costs. And I'm not impugning labor, I'm just merely stating a fact that everyone knows. And so I think that is part of the challenge. I think it also, the challenge of building housing, affordable housing, is the amenities. You build affordable housing, do you just want basic roof, floor, walls, and running water? Or do you want gray water runoff, reclamation systems? That will increase affordable housing costs. Do you want to have modular housing built, or are we going to have, do we have we need to have labor peace and we have a project labor agreement in place? So I don't think that the response is a cookie cutter response, given the state, the diversity of the state of California. What works here or in San Francisco or in LA wouldn't work necessarily in Fresno. And the cost of building also differentiates. So I think that the controller's role in particular is to establish a process that is fair for all projects to be able to compete through and with. I think that the controller has the ability to shape the internal process, meaning the red tape, and relaxing it. I think also, this goes back to a little bit about leadership, connecting with, on the local county level and the city level, working with these planning departments to relax their CEQA, I mean, not relax CEQA, but understanding, I guess, the dynamics and the challenges that CEQA could be a blessing or it could be a curse. CEQA can carry a project quickly through, and it can also kill projects. And I do think that the legislature should continue to work on CEQA rules. Affordable housing projects in particular, I think, should be expedited. Not all cities make it their policy to do so. Most of the larger cities do allow affordable housing projects to kind of get to the top of the pipeline so they can get built, so that we're able to reach our arena goals, we're able to reach a lot of our housing goals, which we all know that we are behind. So a broader definition of what the controller can do, but have an ability to talk about it, because she's a vote. She's talking about the debt financing. She's in the weeds in the housing and in the public housing conversation, but also has a public platform that she could speak from.
You mentioned, that you kind of see the role as like designing a process. You mentioned red tape in the process, and you kind of invoked the legislature's role in reforming CEQA. What do you think the controller's role should be in creating? What specific steps would you take to deal with the kind of red tape you mentioned?
So when we're talking about the legislature coming and making a presentation in committee and talking about a project. I don't know if it's a specific project or if it's a group of projects, or maybe it's projects that are happening in a certain region. Either, probably in my position, I would imagine that I would be advocating and making the case why. So that's a role that one would have in the legislature. Partnering with a member of the legislature on legislation that may maybe make it easier for affordable housing, or maybe there's a hearing being scheduled for arena goals. I really don't know exactly what it could be, but that's just broad examples. When I think about, what was the other example you said? Oh. The legislature, and I said what else?
You were talking about kind of red tape in the process.
Red tape, yes. So red tape. So when I'm talking about the debt financing committees, the Department of Finance is at this table, the Treasurer is at this table, you've got a member from the Senate, the legislature that's at this table, and so there's a lot of conversations that are happening about, when I say red tape, I mean the hoops, Are
you talking about regulations, or are you talking about other red tape is kind of a metaphor that can cover any number of things.
No, I don't mean regulations. No, I'm not talking about the regulations, but I mean the number of meetings you have to attend, the number of people that have to sign off on a particular project, the number of places that you have to go. What I envisioned more of is something like a one-stop shop. Like, you're coming to the committee, all the decision makers are there. We're able to ask our questions. We're able to investigate. We're asking. You submitted the documentations that we need, instead of submitting to Department of Finance, instead of submitting to the Treasurer, instead of submitting to staff on the Controller's office. That you come in and you're making your presentation. That's, I think, what I mean when I, thank you for teasing it out of me. That's what I mean.
So since you're already mad at me, let me ask you. So I'm sure you saw some of the criticism of when Senator Glazer jumped into this race.
No.
Late.
Tell me, what criticisms were there?
I'm sure you saw it. I mean, what are your thoughts about him getting into this race so late? And
I really don't have any thoughts, too many thoughts about Senator Glazer. I have never worked with him. I'm unfamiliar with issues that he's championed. I just don't know him.
Were you surprised that he got into this race?
No, I wasn't. I was neither surprised nor disappointed. I was thinking more critically, like, what is your pathway to victory? I don't see that. I don't see his pathway to victory. It's not clear to me. That's what I thought. What did you think?
I think.
What? No, wait. Give him an opportunity to answer the question.
I think we were all just sort of interested and surprised, to have another candidate jump into a crowded race so close to the deadline. I think it was after even the convention had already happened, right?
Yeah, it was.
So, I don't know, we were just...
Well, did you ask him? Because I am curious. I'm going to watch the footage.
Yeah, I don't think that would...
Is he even coming in?
I don't know. Is he?
He may.
Yeah, well, I have not had the opportunity to even listen to his pitch, to hear his vision. I haven't heard anything. He has not engaged in any way in this process. So I just don't have an opinion. I honestly don't know him. Ask me another question.
Okay. So what makes you a better candidate than, for instance, Lonnie Chan?
Than Lonnie Chan?
Yeah.
I think Lonnie Chan actually, I think Lonnie Chan will have a couple of challenges. Coming in as a Republican, I think that's going to be a challenge. I believe that my understanding of how the legislature works is that it's very much a team sport, and that you do need allies. So I don't want to make assumptions that he doesn't have any Democratic allies. I just don't know. I don't know where his values are. I don't know what's important to him. I have heard his rhetoric that he believes that the office should be independent and it should be a watchdog of taxpayers. Yeah, we're all saying that. We all believe that. But what experience in his background would lead me to believe that that's exactly how he would work? Was it his work with Mitt Romney in his presidential campaign? Was it his work to write a paper on arguments that he made to defund public pensions? I think that's going to be a hard sell for a whole bunch of state employees in the legislature. So I think that he will have an uphill battle in that area. What was the second portion of your question? Did I give you enough?
On that, I just maybe a little bit further on the line now. What is the experience that you have in your background that you feel he's lacking that would allow you to fulfill that independent watchdog role that you think he might not?
I appreciate that. Being elected, being held accountable for votes that I've taken, positions that I've taken, policies that I've advocated for and against, being responsive to a constituency that I serve, answering questions, solving everyday problems, having an understanding about how local governments work, how that works with the state and how the state works, having an understanding about the budget, how the governors may revise, factors into cities' budget process. I've led budget processes for the city and county of San Francisco. I've led the auditing committee for San Francisco. I've made and developed policies. I've written initiatives. I've collected signatures. I've raised money for initiatives. I've taken issues to voters. I have been grilled and I've been on the hot seat. I have certainly traveled out of my comfort zone in the various parts of the state of California to every county that I represent. I have a deep understanding about what the agricultural challenges are versus the urban and suburban, rural counties. I mean, the issues are unique, although I will say homelessness and housing are unifying issues, and now broadband certainly is important for everyone across the entire state of California. And have partnered with members of the legislature to craft and support legislation as it relates to my capacity on the California Board of Equalization. I'm chair of this body, so I sit on the Franchise Tax Board, and so that is also chaired by the Controller's Office, and so this is my second tour of duty on the FTB, and so I understand how the FTB works, how it operates. You may or may not know, but the controller also sits on the Board of Equalization. The current controller, John Chung, was also a former member of the Board of Equalization. And so when I think about the main revenue streams for the state of California, I sit on those bodies already, the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization being another one. And so serving in that capacity, looking every single day for waste, paying attention to big corporations and businesses, making sure that they're not skating through a loophole, and that they are following the rules, and that their lawyers and lobbyists are not creating space for them to escape their responsibilities. The small business community, providing questions, or providing them and connecting them to the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, helping them with their quarterly business taxes, and just making a connection that goes back into the constituent services and being accountable, returning phone calls, addressing these emails, even when it's out of my purview. I don't think anyone has that level of experience.
Nobody else in the race.
Nobody. That's exactly what I mean.
So, I mean, I guess then just, you know, why not? Because we're having this conversation. Where could you see this? Let's say you win the controller seat, you know, gives you a platform to do potentially a lot of other things after this. Have you thought about what you might want to do from there? Would you want to run for a higher office, even from, you know, federal, you know, either federal office or governor or anything like that? Is that something that's in your plans at this point?
That's a hard question, and people ask it all the time. I don't know why people always want to know your business. like what? Like, what do you want to do next? I don't know. And you always feel like I don't know is not a good enough answer, or that it feels disingenuous. But let me tell you this. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and she's very young. And running during a pandemic has been a very different experience than running if I were to run 4 years ago. And I'm grateful that Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, like whatever platform we're talking about, that it exists, because it really has created a lot of flexibility, and honestly, it has allowed me to be able to be here, to be able to do it, and I think I'm doing a really good job of it, right, in terms of getting support and getting the name identification out there and raising the money. But I still am able to come home and be with my family. So it is hard for me to say where I will be, even beyond running for re-election. I just genuinely don't know. There's a lot of people that I would have to talk to, that would shape and it's mostly just the family, to shape that direction. Because running for office does take a lot. It takes me away from key milestones that I miss. And, you know, that's hard.
We have time for one more question. If anybody has a final.
You got emotional answering that question.
I wish you would have. Can you just really? Can we just leave it there?
No, I'm curious. What was it? Did you lose someone? Did you
No, I didn't lose anyone. I just think about like the sacrifice. I want to win, and I feel very, very strongly about serving and like the call to service. But it takes its toll. Being here prevents me from being someplace else and doing other things that are equally important to me. So It is a guilty feeling of being away. And what'd you say?
So why do it?
Because the benefit is greater. I'm able to reach and help more people than just my own immediate family. And we really need a good environment for the future. Not to keep talking in all these cliches, I can't believe you brought me to tears. Oh my God. Why do I do it? Is because I believe in myself. I believe in the and I believe in the future of California. I think that we need to have more diversity. I think we need to have more conversations about equity, what that looks like in the distribution of tax dollars, the distribution of, I don't want to see money going into places that we're not getting our biggest bang for our buck. I don't want to see strong programs, childcare programs, educational programs, after-school programs, you know, food programs not get funded because they don't have a lobbyist. They don't have an advocate. And I just want to make sure that we are being it's in the frame. When I think about the health of the earth, I think about, you know, serving on the Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission and just being able to have a part in making sure that we're addressing climate change and that we are being, that we're listening and responding to real-time data and we're not ignoring it. I believe that the pandemic showed us where we are ignoring key parts, key constituencies, and people died as a result of it. Lack of access to PPP. You know, you might ask, what does this have to do with the controller's office? It has to do with my desire to run and why I step up, take the attacks, take the criticisms, miss family dinners, to be out, to be talking to people about higher things. I do see my role as inspiring, to inspire people to get involved, to give a damn. And I just choose to do it through the simple, humble platform of the controller's office. I think that the controller's office does have the ability to stop wasteful spending just because there's a strong lobby or just because we've been doing things that way doesn't mean that is the most efficient way to do things, to conduct business, or the right way. And going back about the sum total of my experiences, I'm coming from places where I've seen waste and have experienced, because of waste, that there's lack of money to help strong programs and to help uplift people. Thank you.
I have one question.
No more for you. I'm sorry.
What age were you when you learned what the controller does? When did you?
What age was I?
Or just
I've always been interested in money. Okay. And when I was in high school, I was graduating, and Willie Brown was presenting me with a scholarship. I was attending Fisk University, which is one of the nation's oldest historically black universities. And he said to me, "What are you going to go study?" I said, "I'm going to study political science. I'm interested in public administration." He said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "You should study public finance, study the public dollars." And I was like, okay. He said, because when you follow the money, it tells you where people's values are. People can say one thing, but they spend their money with where their values are. You may recall one of the first pieces of legislation Donald Trump passed was a tax policy that benefited the wealthy. And there are a lot of people that look like Donald Trump that are in this public finance space. And there's very few people that look like me in this public finance space. And so I feel like me being at the table is me advocating for people that are not normally in this space. He said, follow the money. He said, one is job security. You know Willie Brown. He said it was job security. He said, two, but it's always important to know where the money is being spent and who's spending it. And the core mission or the core elements of political science is studying who gets what, when, and how much. That's the one thing I remember from Poli-Sci 101. Who gets what, when, and how much. And that has really kind of guided me. So my understanding of the controller job, it's been an evolution. I got on the board of supervisors. I was intimidated with chairing the budget committee. Everybody said, oh, you should chair the budget committee. I didn't want to do it. It wasn't until, I don't know, maybe I was on the body like 3 years. And then I really got into it. And I could see how the money moved. I understood how it moved. More importantly, I understood where it didn't go. And I could see the blockages. So I organized, I educated, I helped people understand the budget process. We created participatory budgeting so it would be a more transparent budget process so people could know how that budget affects them. They want to know why their program didn't get funded. Well, it was because you didn't show up. You didn't show up for public comment. You got to come. You have to show up and you have to advocate. So I see myself as a conduit, as a teacher. I talked a little bit about it when I talked about being an inspiration. Demystifying that process. These budgets are very important. And I've seen how, when we are not at the table, how they take advantage of certain communities when you're not at the table. And so I am running to say I'm here. I'm in the space. I'm at the table and I'm watching. And I am going to keep people accountable. And I'm going to build a bridge with people that are my natural allies and people who are not my natural allies so that we can keep this economy moving forward. I'm going to make sure that we learn from the mistakes from the pandemic and that we ask the critical questions as to what happened. Why did it happen? Because the constituency that I represent and where I come from, people suffered, people died, people got sick, people lost their jobs. And I saw people coming into sides of town that they would not normally come into just to get a vaccination, cutting the line. So all of this, some total of these experiences bring me to controller, because that is where you can watch everything. Where you say, foul, you're wrong, you need to do a course correct. Where we can say, this is awesome, this is a great program, we need to applaud this, we need to support this, and we need to uplift this. Regardless if they're a Republican, or if they're moderate, or if they're supported Bernie, or they supported Elizabeth Warren, like I don't really care. I really am looking at how do we collectively win as a state, as a community. And I think that that is what really distinguishes me from the entire crowd of Democrats and the Republican in the race. Being able to have that purview, that experience, and honestly, motherhood has really softened me. I would never cry, ever, in an endorsement interview. But when I just think about Madison's future, I just think about, like, we live near a Superfund site in the Hunters Point shipyard. I need the Navy to clean up that Superfund site before they pull over the land. I don't want the toxics. I'm in the area. We're talking about restoring the shoreline, restoring the habitat. Like, these are all things that are very important. So that's why I run. When did I first learn about the controller? I don't know, by definition, I don't know, probably when I was during my time on the Board of Supervisors, so about maybe 8 years ago. And that is because I had a tremendous amount of respect for the controller in the city and county of San Francisco, Ben Rosenfeld. He showed me a lot. And I relied on his analysis to help guide my budget process. I relied on his numbers to tell me what programs we could fund and for how much. I relied on his analysis to say, you need to ask the mayor's office for more money. And independent analysis is what helped me. Harvey Rose, who was assigned to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, where to cut in the San Francisco Police Department's budget. They don't really need new cars. I mean, it comes down to that granular detail. So I can see how these decisions that we made in the budget committee that were boring to the most people, taking that information, then coming back to the saying, like, this is what we decided and here are the reasons why. Did you know this? Did you know that 33% of Californians living below the poverty line are making less than $15 an hour? And people are like, people can connect with that because they are living that experience. That's why I think that we need to have, that's why I don't think Steve Glazer is the best. Ron Gallipour talks about being controller for the city of LA. Ask him, what do you do with all those facts and figures? Is LA better off? You're the perfect person to ask that question.
So not to disappoint you, but we don't actually do endorsements.
I know, endorsements. This is important to me because it's a platform, and people read your platform, and people take not your recommendations, but what you say seriously, and you're independent, right? You're not pulled for the moderate left, right, or progressive, you know, not like the LA Times or the Chronicle for that matter. But that's why I was excited to come here and come talk to you. I read your works. I disagree with your opinions about the Board of Equalization, but, you know, we can talk about that another day if you want. I'm happy to come and talk about that.